Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Duke with The New American, and I want to talk to you today about one of the greatest pageants in American life and one that needs to be taken out back behind the barn and shot, put out of its misery. I'm talking about the Academy Awards. I'm talking about the Oscars, which for about 25 years now have been a narcissistic, one might even say, onanistic celebration of Hollywood itself. Constant boasting and bragging about how progressive they are, about how much they are men and women of the people in their $30, $40, $50,000 gowns. It really has jumped the shark a long time ago, but it's really reaching new heights of stupidity and arrogance. And I think this recent Academy Awards ceremony is one of, if not the final nail in this entire enterprise, and for a variety of reasons. And the first thing I want to say about the Academy Awards is the internal inconsistencies of progressivism are on full display. You have some of the richest people in the world. You have some of the most insulated people in the world. You have people who, by and large, are less educated than many people in the public. I mean, many of these actors did not graduate from college. You also have people, besides all of those other things, who have armed security guards, because they're so famous that they really can't go places, take their kids places, unless they have somebody with guns walking them around, or at least having their back. And so despite all of this guns to protect them, despite all of this excessive wealth, despite the fact that they're not terribly educated, they still talk to us as if they are the most educated people in the room. They're adamantly anti-gun despite using them. Despite their tremendous wealth and their private planes and their limousines, they're constantly lecturing you about the fact that you drive an SUV to get your kids back and forth to school and how you're destroying the planet. And I think there are two really good points to be made about this. First, these internal inconsistencies about progressivism. How do we know that progressivism is a religion and not really a fully formed intellectual political movement? Because of the orthodoxy demands, because of the inability of progressives to see the hypocrisy of their own situation. All throughout history, we've seen this. When religion gives way to dogma and orthodoxy, when heresy is applied to anybody who violates even in the smallest way from the orthodox dogma, we see that that religion ceases to be a functioning religion and becomes a kind of fascist operation. It becomes something that is no longer about worshiping God. It's about promoting a certain very narrow worldview at the expense of others. That's exactly what's happened with Hollywood. I like to use this analogy. Take Scientology. And let's be very clear. We wouldn't know what Scientology is. It would not even be our radar screens if Hollywood celebrities didn't support it. If you didn't have a disproportionate number of Hollywood celebrities getting sucked into the cult of Scientology, we wouldn't know what it is. If it was just a couple of bakers down your street, or 20 or 30,000 people scattered around 40, 50 states, you'd never hear about it. But because you got people like John Travolta and you've got people like Tom Cruise who are the face of Scientology, we now know about it. Progressivism, I like to argue, is Scientology applied to Hollywood politics. And because it is such a strict and odd quasi-religion, it's really a cult. Because it's cultic behavior, the members of Scientology, the progressive Scientology, Hollywood, they can't see the contradictions that you and I see so obviously. I gave you a list of them already, right? The fact that they need guns to protect themselves. They build walls around their houses to keep people out. But your guns got to go, and building a wall to keep immigrants out, illegal immigrants out, is now verboten to them. The fact that they are the richest people in the world, their salaries are exceedingly great for what they do, standing in front of a camera and mumbling somebody else's words, and yet they're constantly lecturing America about wealth inequality. We talk about their environmentalism lies, right? A couple years ago, Leo DiCaprio actually won an Oscar for his environmentalism. Let that sink in. This is what I mean about the Scientology cult of progressivism. Right? I'm not saying that all Hollywood actors are Scientologists. I'm saying that the same warped cultish attitudes that gave us Scientology in Hollywood is the same way they approach their politics now. Leo DiCaprio didn't get an Oscar for acting, what the Oscars is supposed to be about. He didn't get an Oscar for Best Supporting, for Actor Lead. He got it simply because he's using his mouth and his resources to talk about global warming. But we know, right, that he got to and from the site of the Oscars that year in a limousine. He has a private plane, and when the Oscar ceremony was over, he got on his private plane and flew all the way to the French Riviera, where he then got on a yacht, his yacht, and partied for a couple of days. And you think about that Oscar 24 to 36 hours after he got the environmental Oscar, how much carbon, how many natural resources did he burn in limousines, private planes, and yachts? He's a threefer. He polluted the air, he polluted the water, he polluted the environment in almost every conceivable way, from car to plane to boat. And yet he's a hero. And so other than this hypocrisy, this dogmatic inability to see, I would also make the argument that all of this hashtag Me Too garbage is part of the quote-unquote Scientologizing of Hollywood politics. For women now, everything is hashtag Me Too. So you have Natalie Portman, who shows up in a very tens of thousands of dollars worth of a gown, and she has the names of all the female directors who weren't nominated embroidered on her gown, right? This is her statement. The problem with this is what you're telling women in Hollywood is that the only reason women aren't nominated is because they are being sexistly discriminated against. And the irony of that is that what are female directors doing when they direct films? They're not making new movies. They're not finding really good scripts written by women about women because women aren't writing them. What are they finding? They're going back to old TV series from the 1970s, remaking Charlie's Angels. They're making Little Women, the classic, for the 13th time. They're taking Ghostbuster franchises and stripping all the funny out of them and making them feminist. So that's the reason. So to be a woman director in Hollywood, you don't have to really tell women's stories. You take men's stories and you replace them with women. You're going to have to excuse America if we're not impressed by that. If feminism is about the story of liberated women, then ladies, get writing. Nothing is stopping you. No one's holding you back. There is no moratorium about women writers and directors. You're just not doing it, and you're not doing it well enough. In fact, you know as well as I do that if we had great directors and writers in Hollywood, affirmative action would put them right at the forefront. But it's even worse, if you ask me, for men. Women have to pretend like just because you're female, you deserve a nomination. And that's why people like Elizabeth Banks, who directed the flop Charlie's Angels reboot, she said even before the movie was released, if you don't like this movie, if this movie is not a success, it's because you're misogynist. And look what it does to men. Men who win Oscars now, according to the Academy, are only winning Oscars because they have penises, because they're male. And so you see these men who win, and they dare not speak about their acting. What's the one reason anybody would watch the Oscars? It would be to hear about their craft, right? Joaquin Phoenix gave one of the really great performances of the last 40, 50 years in Joker. It was a gut-wrenching, very difficult to watch tour de force acting display. And when he wins his Oscar for Best Actor, he gets up there and doesn't mention the part, doesn't mention how he prepared for the part, gives us no insights whatsoever on what it means to have to become that kind of a character. How does a sane person fit themselves, accommodate themselves to that kind of degenerating mental illness? No, none of that stuff. He didn't talk about any of that. He gave us a 4-minute lecture on cow milk and how we're artificially inseminating cows against their will. Then we're kidnapping the babies of the cow and we're taking their milk and putting it in our coffee. Here's what you've done to the real actors, Hollywood. For the woman, it's all about we're not nominated because you hate us. Despite all the reasons all the ways we try to facilitate women in the arts, it's never good enough until you nominate us. So nominate us just because they're women. But for men who win really are shunned from talking about what made them great male actors, because Hollywood's already decided if you're a man, you won simply because you're male. So you get a once-in-a-generation performance from Joaquin Phoenix. He gets up there, and then he can't talk about the part. If he spent 4 minutes talking about how he prepared, they would be all over him for toxic masculinity and white privilege. So what does he do instead? He defaults to the church, the Scientological Church of Progressive Hollywood, and he begins lecturing us about the environment. He begins lecturing us about raped dairy cows in a rambling, completely bizarre acceptance speech that came closer to the Joker and his skewed rhetoric than it ever did to a sane person's. This is what Hollywood has done. Hollywood has made their actresses and actresses schizophrenic. It's turned them into cult figures, pure dogmatists, lecturing scolds. Well, thanks for joining us. I'm Dr. Duke with The New American, and this has been my take on the news.